Welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin. I'm excited about this episode with Melissa Monte, host of the wonderful Mind Love podcast. We go deep in this one, talking about how your challenges are related to your story and how you can use that to launch yourself into a new reality. She has practical steps which she lays out in this episode, so you might want to be ready to take some notes in this one. Melissa Monte is the host of Mind Love, a top-ranked podcast with over 5 million downloads that explores consciousness, storytelling, and what it actually means to wake up. After her own journey through addiction, a felony conviction for someone else's crime, and the slow work of rebuilding from scratch, she discovered something powerful. The stories we're most ashamed of usually contain our greatest medicine. Through Mind Love, her company Story Love, and her upcoming book, The Story of Consciousness, she helps people recognize they're not victims of their circumstances, but authors of their reality. Her work strips away spiritual bypassing to get real about transformation, because consciousness isn't about perfection, it's about showing up as everything you are. Before we begin, I'd love to invite you to visit karagoodwin.com, where you'll find a world of resources to support your awakening journey. Explore my book, Your Authentic Awakening, a beautiful collection of free guided meditations, and other offerings to help you deepen your spiritual connection wherever you are on your path. You can also discover upcoming summits, workshops, and live events designed to expand your consciousness and connect you with a community of like-hearted souls. If you feel inspired by today's episode, please help the show grow by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing. Your engagement truly amplifies the frequency of this work and helps high-vibe content like this reach more people. And now, enjoy this episode. Well, welcome, Melissa. I am so excited to have this conversation with you here today. Thanks for coming on Soul Elevation.
Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Well, we had such a great conversation just 2 days ago on Mind Love. I was so honored to be to join you on Mind Love, and I'm so excited to go deeper into your story because I know you have an amazing, really origin story of how you got into this work. And I do want to get to that. But before we do, I just want to go a little bit into the spiritual nature of your exploration. You've got such I think, a very cool mix of things that you're drawn to. I mentioned when I was a guest on your podcast, you've been going into the Gnostic texts, which resonate a lot with me. And I would love to just start with the mystery schools and what you've learned in terms of the ancient mystery schools and how they have facilitated transformation within people.
Oh, yes. So many of my my expertise, I guess you call it, is just because it was either part of my healing or part of my intense curiosity, which I think is how we find our purpose here anyways, the ways that we're meant to serve. It's usually the path that we've taken, the sacred curriculum that we've been given within our own story. And
the medicine our own medicine that we offer. Yeah.
Yeah. Your wounds become your wisdom, your message. There's so many ways to say this.
Oh, the message, your message. I've never heard that before.
There's so much truth in all of it. And one of those deep explorations for me was deconstruction from religion, because I was raised very Christian and it never really felt right to me. I went hard into it. I tried to give it my all. I pretended with a lot of things, honestly, because everyone around me was, and I was like, I'm doing all the right things. I think I believe in God. And after several of the traumas that I had gone through, I had gotten to a place where I didn't believe in God at all. And it wasn't even just the traumas. It was actually even going to college and taking a world religions class and being like, wait, I thought that story originated in the Bible. What does that mean for the story I heard if it actually originated 1,000 years earlier? So a big part of my finding my own spiritual path because even though I played in the there is no God zone for a while, that didn't really feel right to me either. There was some sort of magic in the world that I couldn't quite explain. And so as I went through spirituality, I had to spend a lot of time kind of unraveling the fear that my religion had planted in. Like, for example, kind of reading about Eastern religions and then saying a quick little prayer to Jesus just in case, like, hey, so I'm not trying to end up in hell. I'm literally trying to get closer to you. So if I'm on the wrong path, you steer me over. Like, know my heart's in the right place. And I eventually started asking the right questions, like, how do I unwind this fear? And it led me to really understanding the origins of things, studying theology, understanding some of the original stories that were told that were then adopted by the Bible, understanding who was in power at the time that certain things were put together, who was the Council of Nicaea, how did they actually choose what got into the Bible and what was left out. And finding the answers to those questions was really helpful, because it's really like following politics today. What is in the best interest of those in power for us to believe to keep us more submissive and better controlled? And a big part of that was fear. But one of the things that I had found in my deep dive was the ancient mystery schools, which I just found fascinating. And for over 1,000 years, people traveled across the Mediterranean to this small town outside of Athens for one specific experience, and that was to be transformed by a story. And so these were the Eleusinian mystery schools, and it was the most famous initiation rites in the ancient world, really. Plato went through them, Cicero, Marcus Aurelius. So they all made this pilgrimage to experience different stories, such as the myth of Persephone and Demeter. And then they left as different people. It was like the original psychedelic transformation, but really just with the story, with the dark, with the acting out. And so the Greeks mastered something that I think we have forgotten, or my theory has intentionally been hidden from us. And it's that stories can be a consciousness technology. So they weren't just lectures where people learned about mythology. They were sort of like transformation laboratories where people became the story. And so initiates would fast for days. They'd drink this psychoactive brew called kykeon, and then they would enter these really darkened chambers where the myth was enacted around them and kind of through them. And so they experienced themselves as Persephone descending into the underworld, feeling that terror of separation from everything familiar, or the disorientation of being in alien territory, and then the gradual adaptation to the underworld consciousness before experiencing return and resurrection. And so they understood that you became what you identify with. When you deeply identify with a mythic character, your psyche almost reorganizes around that character's patterns. And so their struggles become your struggles. Their consciousness becomes available to your consciousness. It actually reminds me of what Napoleon Hill talked about, where he would talk about your invisible counsel. He kind of invented the mastermind, where he would say he would study people so deeply, like Abe Lincoln or people that he really looked up to. And so he could get to a point of knowing them and their philosophy so well that he could actually ask, well, what would they do in this situation? I think that's one of the most powerful hidden benefits of any connections that we have, whether we know the person really well in person or whether we just deeply study our heroes. But that's what was happening here. The gods in the myths were their heroes. They were the original influencer in a way. And so they became really strategic about which myths they used. Every mystery school story followed a similar template. Separation from ordinary consciousness, descent into the unknown, then an encounter with death or limitation, and then consciousness or conscious return with a more expanded awareness because of what you've learned through that journey. And so they succeeded because they understood three things that modern spirituality usually misses: embodied experience over just information, precise symbolic language where every detail corresponds to specific psychological processes, and then kind of a graduated intensity. So they didn't throw people into the deep end immediately. They built the capacity gradually before facing that full death and resurrection experience. So we can use that same technology today by approaching transformation stories as consciousness rather than entertainment. That's why I'm always saying that I think biblical literalism was the worst thing to ever happen to the Bible. There was a reason that Jesus spoke in parables. Parables is what connects. And this is something I even learned through other modalities. The reason story came so together for me was I spent 20 years as a marketer. I'm still a marketer. And we know it through marketing that people don't create a behavior change or even spark behavior like a purchase or hiring you through facts and logistics. You can sit there and show them all your credentials. What people connect is the story. Even Russell Brunson, one of the most famous marketers, calls it the Epiphany Bridge. Every time he tries to sell something new, he creates that very specific transformation story of where he started, his kind of aha moment, the epiphany that he had of this new way of being. And so when you can connect with somebody through story, or learn to connect with yourself through story, understanding what stories are driving your current behavior and what story you want to be guiding your life, you can use this kind of technology to either bring people with you or spark a change in yourself.
Wow. I love that. That's amazing. And first of all, I love that this all took place in Greece. I had chills all up and down my spine because yesterday, this whole Greek reincarnation, like past life connection, really came front and center. And now here you are, which has my attention, where I'm like, okay, Melissa's bringing in some Greek stuff. I hear you. And but I was having this amazing massage. I have this amazing massage therapist, and she's Reiki trained, and she does reflexology. She's a cranial sacral, she is so in touch with her own energy. And then she's like kind of subtly doing energetic healing as she's doing an amazing massage. It's just, I hope everybody has a Sheila in their life. But
I have a Celia and she's amazing.
Oh, good. I'm so glad that you have your own version of it. But there's something at least yesterday, I kept having these flashes of Greece. And I've only been to Greece once, and it was many years ago. But it was ancient Greece. And I don't have a lot of details about what it is. And it's unusual for me to feel like a specific past life bleed through. But there is something, and it's not the first time that it's happened in that setting, but I never remember. It's always like this Greek life comes back up, and then it's like, this is familiar. I think this comes up every time, and I'm just like, what a weird thing to think about. Why am I thinking about ancient Greece? And so, and then when I finished, I had an email from somebody who's going through this. She's not going through a new spiritual awakening, but like a new layer of spiritual awakening. And she was just sharing that she'd had a couple of sessions with people and these past lives that came up. And there was so much synchronicity between the two readings that she just had. And one of them was this life in ancient Greece. And I'm like, what she was saying was just resonating with me. And I'm like, here it is again. And then it came up again in another podcast. Somebody brought up ancient Greece, and now here we are. And I'm just like very interested in that. So I'm like feeling all this resonance as you're talking about it. But it makes me wonder too, what role has this played in your life? I love how you talk about it as a technology. So for your own healing and your own transformation, what role has this type of approach taken in your life?
Oh, it's really been the entire story. That's what we are all living in a story. We are meaning making machines. And so most of us identify with the circumstances that have happened to us, or we think that we are. However, the truth is we're identifying with the meaning that we've given those circumstances. And so Man's Search for Meaning talks about this. The author actually wanted to interview people that survived the Holocaust and wondered why some of them seemed to thrive and other ones, it just broke them. Their life was never the same. They couldn't regain their identity, their selves after it. And he wanted to know why. And he realized it was the meaning that people were giving things. And so we have that control to give our lives different meaning. And that just took me a really long time to understand. And so when I was young, I had everything going for me. I had a lot of hope for my future. I was always told that I was smart and intelligent. And when I was 15, I was sexually assaulted at my first high school party. And it was not just a private thing. I was completely unconscious, and there was a crowd of older boys basically cheering on my abuser. And I didn't really know how to deal with this. And so I decided I was fine. But because multiple people were there, it ended up spreading around school with a different story than the one that I knew, one where I was not the victim. And I had no control over my reputation or what people said about me. It was actually part of why I fell away from the church. The church found out I was sexually active and took away my solos, and I was in choir. And they didn't ask any questions about how I was sexually active, how I got there. And so there was a lot of internalization where I didn't really even realize that I was sexually assaulted. I thought it was my fault because I had been drinking. I didn't know what I said. The Me Too movement had not happened. So I did not have any other stories to compare mine to where I could see that I had been taken advantage of. So I think that's when I started losing pieces of myself without even realizing it. And losing yourself isn't this dramatic moment where everything falls apart. It's slower than that. It was like every year, each small hit to my worth, every time I pushed down what I was really feeling. It was kind of like that thing about putting a frog in water and slowly turning up the heat. I just had no idea how much of myself I was losing. But then the less I valued myself, the more I craved validation, the worse I treated myself, the worse I let other people treat me. And so then my dad died soon after that. And it was almost like whatever fragile sense of self I had left died with him. And so I did what a lot of us do when the pain gets too big. I just tried to make myself numb with bulimia, pills, party drugs, alcohol, whatever promised to make me feel something else. It could even just be staying busy, social media, everything. And so I was spinning in this cycle of self-destruction, but it was like my normal just kept shifting. So I didn't really notice it. And when you can't find anything within yourself to hold on to, you start just reaching for anything outside of you to fill the void. And so that was coincidentally when I met Mike. We'll call him Mike for these purposes, but he swept me off my feet with 5-star dinners and luxury resorts. On our very first date, he actually gave me this diamond necklace that made me feel valuable for the first time in years, and I wore it every single day. But then the lies started early. We stayed in hotels because his house was being renovated, and then it turned out he lived with his mom. And then he said, well, he was living there to help his disabled brother. And then it turned out his brother didn't live there, and his disability was like mild ADD. And so every lie got a little bigger, but it was so slow, and they started small. And so it was like the excuses got easier to swallow. I almost look at it as like he was training me to deep throat his bullshit. So part of me knew something was off. Like I could feel the cracks in the reality he was selling me, but admitting it to myself also meant admitting that the dream was dead. There was no knight in shining armor sweeping me out of my life and into his, which also meant facing everything I was trying to escape. And so then when I found out he was cheating repeatedly, I buried that too because the apologies felt so good. And then I found out about his meth addiction, and I was actually relieved because something outside of me was to blame instead of just my worth. And so I wasn't just ignoring red flags, I was collecting them like they were going to complete some kind of a set. But really, deep down, I believed he was all I deserved. And if he barely wanted me, why would somebody better? And so I just stayed. And then, well, I actually did try to get away for about a month. I moved in with my friend in Hawaii, and I got my life together and I felt better. But then I came back and I had not done any of the inner healing. And so it was just a few phone calls and I was back in his spiral. And it was very soon after that we were driving to lunch and I saw police lights behind us, and I thought we were being pulled over for speeding or something. But the officers made us get out of the trunk or get out of the car so they could search it. And when the officer opened the trunk, I just will never forget the look on his face when he saw 50 lock boxes, a pair of bolt cutters, and cases. Like, I'm talking hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stolen jewelry. And I knew he had a jewelry business. I thought I was helping him with it. He said that's what he did with his dad. But turned out that business was actually stealing it from houses that were for sale and selling everything on eBay. And then the diamond necklace that he gave me that I wore every day, including that one, was also stolen. And so his crime was now my crime. And a big part of like his stealing spree was actually when I was gone. He just went on a spree, robbed like 50 houses during that time. And there were some eyewitness accounts. He had my dog and he was cheating on me with a blonde sex worker who kind of fit my description. And so it just more intertwined our cases. But because we were arrested together, if I went to trial to prove my innocence, which would have been fairly easy to do since I was literally not on the mainland for all of these eyewitness accounts. Well, there were only 2, I think. But if I did that, he had to go to trial too. And it would have guaranteed that he got 10 years in prison. Or I could accept a felony deal so he could take a deal too. And at that point, I was sort of used to giving him everything. So I took the felony. But I just remember sitting in that courtroom listening to his victims, like a military mother whose jewelry box held her dead son's baby hair, or elderly couples missing decades of anniversary gifts. And he just showed no remorse while I'm bawling my eyes out in the corner and preparing to sacrifice my freedom for his. And something clicked, like the separation, the trauma bond between the two of us just disintegrated. And it took a while, but I started to see the pattern, the algorithm, as I call it, about how every small choice, every belief I held, every thought that I left unchecked had led me to that police car. And I realized that every single day I'd been creating this story based on the meaning that I had been giving these events, what they meant about me. And I'd been creating this reality without even knowing it. And so it wasn't just one aha moment. It was 1,000 little ones over time. But I started to realize that everything came back to how I was interpreting my own story, and that I could actually rewrite that. I could change the meaning that I gave different events. And when I did that, it would affect the subconscious and change my life, not just in the present moment, but the future that I was building.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And when you talk about the rewriting of your story and how that it really helped to rewire, reconfigure your reality, were there specific steps? Was there kind of a protocol that you did to do that? Was it through, a talk therapy approach, or was it a little bit just more on the fly than that?
For me, it was more on the fly. But as you can tell by my deep dives into everything I become interested in, I became really curious as to which of the 1,000 things I did actually moved the needle the most. And I do believe that bringing intention to almost anything, regardless of the path that you're taking, if your heart is there, there's the ability to change. But I wanted to find the fastest path and really figure out, like, what are those pieces that you really need to know? And so I've done this in a bunch of different ways where I took little pieces, like one little story. I've taken my overall story and I've kind of rewritten it. But what I've realized is that it comes back to 7 steps, really. There's 7 pieces of your story that you need to know to have a breakthrough the fastest. And you can do these steps in a couple of different ways. You can either look at it as the overall, which I'll explain in a minute. Like, you just throw everything that fits in that to kind of see the themes of your life. This is really helpful if you're trying to find your purpose, you're trying to find the common themes you don't really know. Or you can look at it through the lens of one thing. Like, say, you struggle with relationships, or you have this one thing that keeps showing up in your life. You can look at it through that lens. And so we started the algorithm, and this is one of the most important pieces to know, because this is really the loop you've been living inside. It's the pattern shaped by past experiences, beliefs, and conditioning. And so everyone starts here. You didn't consciously choose this story. It was given to you. This is also why we learn that age 0 to 7 is the things that happen to you at that time, the things that you're told become your baseline, because your brain is basically in theta the entire time, just absorbing and taking everything as truth. And so the key questions to ask to figure out your algorithm is, what were you taught about blank? So if you're looking at it through one lens, like, what were you taught about relationships? What were you taught about men? What were you taught about intimacy? Or you can look at it as your overall, like, what were you taught about the big things, success, love, worth, relationships, identity growing up? What recurring experiences have shaped your beliefs about yourself? Or what recurring experiences have shaped your beliefs about blank if you're looking at it through one lens? If your life were a movie before things changed, what was the main storyline? Or if you had to summarize your past patterns in one phrase, what would it be? Example, I always had to prove myself, or I always had to earn love. What would it be? And so these are the subconscious patterns that you might not see. And this is where most people that haven't done the work live. And even the people that have done the work, I still find things within my algorithm that I would like to bring to the surface and change. The second piece, step 2, is the disruption. This is the shock that breaks the loop. Something shakes up the algorithm. It could be a crisis. It could be an unexpected truth. And so it might be something big, like a sexual assault or getting arrested. But it could also be something a teacher said to you that just landed in a new way, or something your best friend said. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, that's what you see? I didn't see that until now. And so this is the moment, or the series of moments, that made you realize something wasn't what you thought. Third is the awakening. This is seeing the pattern for what it is. The fog lifts. You see the pattern and you realize, oh, this isn't just life. This is the story I've been living. Not everybody lives this way. Not everybody believes this. So what was the exact moment you saw the pattern? For some people, this overlays right on top of the disruption. They almost happen at once. For others, something disrupts it and you just feel discombobulated, and it takes a while to see what that pattern is. That was a little bit more my path. But yeah, what stories from your past suddenly made sense in a new way because of this information? And then fourth is the resistance. This is the second place that people live the longest. This is where you see the old story, but it doesn't let go so easily. So it's where fear, resistance, and identity crises show up. And if you think about it, most of us know what we need to do to fix our life, or at least some of the steps. And it's just hard to do. Like, you bought the gym membership, but you can't find yourself going, or you want to start studying spirituality and you just keep forgetting, or you want to start the meditation practice and then you give up. So it's really what fears or doubts made it hard to step into the new version of you, or where did you hesitate, self-sabotage, or nearly turn back? This is usually a pretty big emotional battle. And so this helps you to surface the hidden fears that you might not have named, or finding conflicting emotions about the change that you want to have. And then fifth is the choice. It's where you're like, okay, I'm done living in the in-between. I'm actually going to commit to change. And so transformation isn't just about seeing the pattern. It's about choosing a new one. And so this is where you say, I'm not going back. What was the exact moment you decided to change for real? What actions proved to yourself that this time was different? 6 is the embodiment. This is where you actually become the new version of you, where change meets action. So you're not just thinking differently, you're actually living differently. What actions, habits, choices solidified this transformation? This is actually the piece where if you end up taking your soul work, your mess, and it becomes your message, a lot of this embodiment part is what becomes your curriculum. It becomes what you teach other people, the actual steps beyond the mindset. And so these are the first 6 steps. And I didn't just make these up. It's actually just a new lens to look at the hero's journey, where every good story, the sort of track that every good story follows, that hooks other people, but also you. But there's a big piece that I think most of them miss. Well, the questions to actually get you to see yourself as the hero of the story, but it's step 7. And this is what I call the gold, or the soul of it. It's extracting the deeper meaning and patterns. So the story isn't just about what happened. It's about what it means, like I said before. So looking back, what was this story really about? How does this experience help you help others? What's the one sentence of wisdom that this journey gave you? Or what new patterns do you see in your life now? Usually you start kind of feeling like the sage when you start extracting this out. And so these are the 7 steps that I take clients through, that I've taken myself through, where it just helps you see things with the most clarity. And so in my programs, I have AI tools, for example, that helps you just kind of put in your answers, even if it's a jumbled mess, and it will extract things in a very specific way. But even without that, even if you just sit here and pause this podcast and go back to some of the questions that I prompted you with in each of these stages, I promise you will see your life in a new way. Even people that have been doing the work for years. For example, one of my clients he was a relationship coach, and he's been coaching for years. But when he went through this process, he actually could see how his story was guiding him to something more specific within that container. He had experienced erectile dysfunction, actually, and then found out it was because of a brain tumor in his head. And that was just part of his story. It ended up leading to him like seeing things in a new way, actually connecting to his intuition, leaving his relationship. He was actually engaged, realizing it wasn't right. And so he sort of just told it as the factual chronology. But when he went through this, he started to realize that that tumor was on his pineal gland, the seat of his intuition. And it was actually creating a physical manifestation of not being able to connect to his partner or to his own inner wisdom. And so when he could see this thread, it changed the way that he approached his work, his clients, how he saw his purpose, because he could see the golden threads, the patterns within it, by looking at it through this structure. So it's a very powerful structure for approaching story work.
Wow, that is so powerful. And when you're talking through that, it made me think about, I've had a guest actually bring this up recently, and it landed with me where I was like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that, and that's so true. But how humans have a tendency to prefer an uncomfortable behavior, or something that isn't even bringing them what they want, and they know that. For example, an abusive relationship, but they prefer what they know versus what they don't, even if there's so much promise in anything but that.
Oh, yeah.
And so I don't know how much you come up against that or how that resonates, but I'm curious about your thoughts about that. And then also just if there's any sort of typical progression through these steps in terms of timeliness, if it's, because you were saying, sometimes this step happens in conjunction on top of another step, and they kind of just happen at the same time. And then other times it takes a long time. Is it really a personal journey in terms of time, or is there kind of a natural progression that you see?
It depends. When I was first starting this, I had to look at it through my life. So from the algorithm to actually finding the wisdom was a decade, maybe more, or some of the things I would understand right away and some of the things needed more time. Now, because I give my place here in the world a different meaning, I can see things much more rapidly. I don't cling on to my ideas as much because I have found that when I let go of that, when I actually release it, most of the time that I'm clinging, that's coming from my own mind, which is the ego. And there's something greater that could be guiding my life, whether you want to look at that as a higher power, God, the universe, or your heart center. It's getting out of your mind. And so now I can go through these steps very quickly, and I still use them. For example, my miscarriages last year were very difficult, and I was very diligent in like watching the meaning that I was giving to the situation, making sure I wasn't making it mean something about my body, my place as a woman, my duty to my family, things like that. And so it becomes an almost, for me, I don't need to go through every question of every step. I can just sit there and say now, oh, I can spot some unconscious beliefs here. Why do I feel fear about going towards this? Oh, I have this belief that women don't make the money, or whatever it is. I have this belief that I need to earn my place in the family by working when I'm just as valuable as I am. So I can just see those now. I don't even really need to identify, oh, which was the part that broke the loop. Like, I just know, oh, the algorithm versus the story I want to have. But when I was really unwinding, because it's a difficult concept to grasp, you can't just say, sorry, like the meaning you've given your life isn't true. Create something new. Most people in the beginning of all this will be like, what do you mean? And they have to really feel it. And so when I first did this process for myself, I was following a slightly different template that didn't feel as cohesive to me. But I couldn't figure out which was which. Like, was it the sexual assault that was the disruption? Was it the arrest that was the disruption? So like I said, I just put everything, it was out of chronological order, and it still allowed me to see, oh, like, this is always happening at once. It's not like you just go through these one time and then you're in the enlightenment phase. Like, there were multiple disruptions in my life, and I needed them because I didn't just get it right then. So I was going to be shown in a new way, and a new way, and a new way. And it's really how the universal laws work. My view of God isn't a man in the sky, and I have actually moved away from even saying universe quite as much, because I'm shifting into kind of a new understanding of it. But I see God more as the divine matrix that holds everything together, that universal flow of love and life. I just told my son, my 4-year-old, I was like, I don't think God is a man. I think he's more like energy. And he like pauses for a long time, and he's like, what if God is a big giant battery that gives life to the trees? And I was like, my work here is done. You got that way faster than I did. But I think it's the structure of everything, the universal laws that keep things in check, that keep this transformation rolling. And so I love the universal laws. I've gone really deep with them. But one of my favorites is the law of reflection. It's realizing that everything in your life is a reflection for your highest good. So when people say to shift from why is this happening to me to why is this happening for me? Yeah, that's one way to look at it. But also it's like, what is this reflecting back to me? What is in my awareness right now? How can I sit with that? Like, I keep seeing destruction. Where in my life am I experiencing destruction? And I think that it starts far away. We might see it all around us with other people, but if it's unchecked, it keeps coming closer and closer and closer until it's in our immediate circle, till it's in our immediate family, till it's within our body and we are experiencing disease. And so I used to not understand that, not see that. All these things were random. And so it would get closer and closer and deeply affect me. Now I can let it be at an arm's length most of the time. Hold on, I'm seeing this a lot. There's something that I need to internalize here. There's something that I need to shift within myself. And it's still impossible to escape all of the negatives. I'm not saying I will never face disease, knock on wood, I hope not. But when I find that things stay a lot more peaceful in my immediate realm if I'm able to take the things afar and immediately ask those questions, immediately turn it inward and say, is there anything in this for me? What do I need to sit with? What do I need to feel and experience, and make the conscious choice to shift within myself? Because there's really only two options. We are either consciously creating our lives, or we are living through our algorithm. I think there's this big misconception in the self-development world where we like discover the secret or the law of attraction, and we're like, oh, I think I can just manifest when I feel like it, or like, cool, I have this powerful tool to create my reality. But then it's like this, it's like tarot cards that we pick up and put down when we're not using them anymore. But we don't realize that that's not an option. We're either consciously creating or we're acting from our algorithm. We're consciously creating or unconsciously repeating at any given moment. And so when you realize that, the intention just becomes the process of life. You can't bring intention to everything at once, but you can pick the things that are alive for you right now, that are showing up for you quite often right now. You can use the law of reflection to have it guide you on your curriculum, and then just go piece by piece. And that's the work that we're here for.
I love that. I love how you break it down and make it more manageable, because it's very big. It's, let's change your life. But it's so practical and moment by moment. And it makes me reflect too on our conversation from a couple of days ago, because we started talking about, we dipped a little bit into sacred geometry and into patterns. And I'm hearing you talk about patterns. We're talking about it in terms of habits and how we have repeated behavior. But I felt like maybe sacred geometry held some, you had a place for that in your heart. I don't know if there's anything from more of that kind of mystical side, the sacred geometry side. There's the Greek affiliation too with the sacred geometry with Plato and Aristotle and so forth. And I'm just going to keep that as an open topic if there's anything that jumps out for you there.
Oh, yeah. Well, just like I talked about God being kind of the sacred system with anything, I see this as God's code, really. It's the mathematical skeleton of everything in the background. That's why numerology shows up. That's why all of these systems that seem like completely separate systems, astrology, human design, and like they all seem to ring true, because they're just different layers of the code on top of one another. And so
yes.
when we see even all of the stories, I mentioned how the same stories show up in different cultures across time, even if they were across the world and they had no means to come together and share these stories, the same stories still show up. And I think it's because that's how our human brains interpret the code. It's the awakening blueprint. And so it kind of shows that, to me, creation isn't random, it's patterned. The same geometric ratios that shape galaxies also shape our cells, shells, stories. And so even like I went back and reinterpreted a lot of the biblical stories that just didn't make sense on the surface. Like, wait, hold on. The first two humans already failed, and that's supposed to be their fault, not the creator's fault. And then damned the rest of humanity. But also you're supposed to be all-knowing, but you didn't know this was going to happen, or you did know it was going to happen. So you basically set us up for failure and then said everything's going to be painful after that. And then we can't go back to eat. What are you talking about? And so, but it really actually mirrors the geometry, if you want to say, of creation itself. So to me, Eden is unity consciousness. It's the wholeness before the separation. The serpent is also the spiral. It's activation through movement and duality. The apple, this is sort of the overlap between spirit and matter and the birth of awareness. The fall from Eden was actually the descent into density. That was when our consciousness actually separated from the divine. And then the exile is the return to that unity consciousness. So it's not literal. It's almost like this geometric unfolding of consciousness. It tells the consciousness story, the same one that A Course in Miracles tells, or that Eastern religions tell in a slightly different way. But we are looking at it as only through the literal story. And so we just lose a lot of the gold there. But then it ends up becoming, and when you even think about it that way, it's like the consequences of that separation in the Bible, it looks like our punishment, like, oh, childbirth is going to be hard. You have to work for your food now. But also those are just the cost of being human, maybe, when we chose to come into this life. And so I know that's not exactly the structure that we think about, but I think the more that we see things as sacred geometry, the more we have, I'm sure your listeners that have had some psychedelic experiences, even if it's just a little bit of mushrooms, it's like you take a little bit of mushrooms and you're in a parking lot. Suddenly it's like every car is the same size. Everything's lined up exactly. The geometry is always right there. You look at the leaf and you see new patterns. But when you're in your typical state of mind, it just looks like a leaf because we've already given that leaf meaning. But I wonder how we would see it if we hadn't have already internalized it with the meaning that we would give it. I think that becomes closer to what we see in the psychedelic mindset with a little bit more DMT. And so when you realize that everything that all the messy humanness is actually fitting into this very specific structure, and they're just overlaid on top of each other. And it just depends on where your mindset is to how much you can see the synchronicities, how much you can see the patterns. But the more you focus your awareness on that and expand into that, the more it becomes a little bit closer to your default. You don't need to try so hard. You don't need to take something to get there. You just trust and it appears.
I love that. And it's funny because, again, we were on the other side of the table just 2 days ago, and you were like, yes, you're speaking my language. I feel like you're in my head. You're just speaking out. And now I'm like, now it's my turn to be like, oh my God, you're just saying my stuff that I love. Like, I just love this stuff. I love seeing the world this way. And it resonates so deeply with me. I wonder, as you were talking about like reinterpreting the stories of the Bible that you've been told your whole life and seeing them with new eyes and that curiosity, have you come across the numerical encodement, decoding of the Bible and Shakespeare's? There's like, they've done, I don't even know who it is. I think I heard about it through Robert Edward Grant, but I don't know that he was the one who did it, but maybe he was, I'm not sure. He and Richard Rudd were talking about it, and it was an amazing interview. But there's some sort of way that it's been like decoded, both of those. Have you come across this?
Yeah, there's this book actually called The Bible Code. And
yes, that sounds familiar. Yes.
Yes. And there's a few different ways that this happens. This is why I find everything so fascinating, and I see spirit in everything, even if it's been manipulated. Like, God will find a way. A Course in Miracles talks about this all the time, where it basically says when a problem is created, the solution is immediately created as well. And so I do see our Bible as being manipulated. And also there's something called the Bible Code. It's also known as the Torah Code. But it's this idea that hidden messages are actually embedded within the Hebrew text of the Old Testament, specifically the Torah. So the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, which I have an interesting relationship with. I went through years of hating those books because they're so brutal. Like, there's just like, God is just like this egotistical tyrant who's like, wait, you looked back, let me kill your whole family.
Yeah. Here are the locusts, unleash the locusts.
But understanding this Bible code actually healed a lot of that in me, where it's just like, just trust everything is meant to be a bridge to something else. And again, it's only abhorrent when I'm taking it literally. So, but it talks about how the entire text, how do I explain it? It's like one continuous string of Hebrew letters, no spaces. And so they pick every nth letter. I can't remember it's like every 50th or 500th, but supposedly they discovered really meaningful words or phrases that seemed to predict events or even reveal hidden truths. And so I remember one of them, there was this Israelite prime minister who kept finding the phrase assassin that will assassinate in one of the famous code matrices published before his death. And then people have claimed to find terms like Hitler and atomic holocaust and even twin towers encoded in Genesis. And so the skeptics say it's coincidence, but I personally don't believe in coincidences. And so I also think, though, I wonder if I would have found the same patterns as that Israelite prime minister, or if that was just a pattern meant for him. And so it was there at the right time in his right state of mind for him to discover his code, whereas that would have been meaningless to me. So I wouldn't have even seen it. So it's just a fun thing to play with and discover more about.
So when you like the Bible code, it helps you to be able to do this yourself rather than
personally
it
don't
having...
use the Bible code.
Okay.
However, I like that it exists because, again, for me, the code that I saw in that was like, to me, I was just like, off with their heads. I want nothing to do with this book for a long time. And so that's why it's been really healing for me to go back and reinterpret it without the literalism in multiple ways. For me, it's been going into the stories, but also this was a really, like I mentioned, this was a really powerful discovery for me when I read the book. I didn't feel called to all of a sudden start decoding myself, which sometimes I am, depending on what it is. I'm like, wait, I got to just keep going deep down. I'm going to keep pulling this one thread. But for me, just the understanding of it was helpful because, again, I was getting a lot of resentment toward my upbringing. I had a lot of judgment. I think that's a big part of my work here. That's actually been something I've been working on the last few years too, where I'm like, okay, I have this beautiful understanding of the Bible, but I actually still have a judgment and a separation with Christians in general. Like something about it makes me angry. Like I feel like I was fooled or something like that. And so I've been asking for healing around that. And now I'm getting it in different ways. I recently interviewed someone who also was raised really religious, but he said something that I could just feel like broke off one of my calluses. And he said, you know, religious people are actually much further ahead than most because they're already communing with spirit in a way. They have that, they believe in the connection at least. And so it's a step up. Whereas I had sort of seen it as this big thing that held me back where I had to unravel all this fear and it would have been easier for me to start with a belief in nothing. When now I see that as laying the groundwork. And I actually, even got further confirmation. Both of my parents were religious and divorced, but my story with my parents is just an interesting one. My dad was always not really a provider, but he was always around, always loved me. He went through a lot of trauma too, but I think I had a little resentment, like, why just religion? Like, why, like, come on, like, can't you see through this like I could? Like, almost in a, like I was making it mean something about them, really. And then I was looking into numerology, and my life path number is 33 master number, which is also a 6. But I realized that my dad had a different life path that fit very well with his, but his soul urge number was a 33-6. So what his soul was urging for, what he really wanted in this life was this path of being a healer, being a teacher. And I took that on as my life path. And I've always kind of seen my dad pass the torch, but I thought it was just entrepreneurism. He was always trying stuff and failing. And part of my journey has been, well, I want to pick up where my dad left off, but it was more like from an ego thing, like, I'll do this for you. And just understanding the numerology of it, I suddenly got this new visual where he was laying down the bricks of the path that I was walking. And it was so healing. It brought me to tears. And so sometimes it's just this small shift, like realizing, okay, the Bible isn't just this completely man-made manipulation book. There's truth in it. Look what these stories are also saying. Or look, even these books that you really dislike, there's a code within them that have guided people towards something. And so when I can see that there's a deeper meaning underneath things, a lot of times it's a healing that I specifically need, but somebody else might see something slightly different, and that happens to be for them.
So beautifully said. I love that. Well, Melissa, this has been very rich. I've loved every moment. Can you please talk a little bit as we close up here about story love and mind love and how you work with people and how people can find you?
Yes. Yeah, I am at mindlove.com. So all of my programs are there. You can also find my podcast, Mind Love, on any of your favorite platforms. It's 2 words. But I have a lot of different, or a couple different programs. There's one if you just want something that's very laid back but takes you through growth in a very manageable way. I have the Mind Love Collective, which every month there's a theme, and there's just some short videos and some work that you can do and a community that you can converse about it through. People love that. It's a very affordable membership option. Or if you want to do the deeper work and actually get into the story work, the story coaching, that's what Story Love is for. And so I have different AI tools that I've developed. There's calls that you join, and we actually do the hard work of your story, figure out what you need to process, but also figure out how to make that your message. If you're wanting to take this out into the world, that is what connects with people. That is what I think how you stand out online in general is really figuring out how to connect people with your story. And so I show you how to take that story and share it in a way that will really makes people lean in, as well as create all of your content from your story and just make a really story-driven, cohesive brand. So there's the mindset work of it, and then there's the taking it out into the world work of it.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, my friend. This has been great. It's such a joy and an honor to connect with you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Soul Elevation. If someone in your life would be inspired or uplifted by what you heard today, please take a moment to share it with them. These are the kinds of conversations that ripple out and elevate collective consciousness. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the powerful episodes ahead. Your presence, your energy, and your support truly help amplify this mission of raising frequency and anchoring in a more awakened humanity. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you for the next episode of Soul Elevation.